Hello there and welcome back to another video here on Wristwatch Revival. My name is Marshall. I'm going to be guiding you through this restoration of, I don't actually know what kind of watch this is. I got it off of eBay. It says Master Mix on it, which I assumed, well, I thought it was maybe some type of motor oil. It kind of, the logo reminds me of a motor oil logo. And I would have to look that up, which I did. The watch was not really running correctly. As you can see, the hand spin, but it won't actually go. Although I did notice that I could get it to run for a little bit and then it would die again. So I don't know. I bought it as not working off of eBay for repair. So the first thing we need to do, of course, is take a look and see what's going on in the movement here. If there's anything obvious. And also, you know, this is a time when I like to make sure that this is something I can actually work on. And interestingly, the watch is now running. So, okay. Let's put it on the time grapher and see how well it's running. Because if it's actually just running fine, I might have just gotten lucky here with my eBay purchase. Oh. Well, no. It's not running fine at all. Okay, it's actually kind of a disaster. So it's running really badly. And so now we switch our hopes to, well, hey, at least it's running and maybe it just needs a service. That's where I want to go with it. So let's get into the guts of this thing. Like I said, I don't really know much about it. It's an automatic watch. As you can see, it has a Hellbros watches, it says on the rotor there. So that's the manufacturer of the movement. And as you can see, most of the movements I work on actually have a screw there for the setting lever, but this time it's actually one of the spring-loaded ones that you just push down the button and then you can pull out the winding crown. And as you can see, there's some type of real gunk in the crown tube there. I'm not really sure what that is exactly, but it's pretty gross. The crown looks fine though. And you can kind of just set this muck aside so it doesn't get stuck on another part of the movement. And then we can go about trying to get the movement out. The first thing to do is there's a movement ring. These are usually in place just to keep the movement from moving around in the case. It's a spacer. And then we can remove the movement. Yeah, it just comes right out. So no issue there. As I mentioned, it says Master Mix on it. I looked this up. It's not motor oil. It's actually fertilizer or feed for cattle or farm animals or something. So not exactly what I thought. I assume that this is a watch probably from around the 60s that was given to people that worked for this company. That's what I can assume. Maybe an anniversary gift for an employee, or maybe a special event or a retirement gift or something. Maybe for a salesperson as an incentive. I don't know. But it's got kind of a cool painted logo on it, and I figured why not? The price was right. This watch, it was about $100 off of eBay. And I figured, let's give it a shot. So first things first, with regards to the dial side here, we just, of course, have to take off the hands. I like using those hand levers to do so. And I got these sweet new tweezers. The tips are actually wood, which is fantastic for picking up small, delicate parts. Now, they won't work very well on moving things around or anything hard because, of course, the wood will just deteriorate. So it's kind of a specific type of tweezer, but I found it very useful. And now we can take the dial off and take a look. As you can see, this watch has a date function. So we'll need to address that as well. For now, we can take the hour wheel off, though. And that leaves the cannon pinion. I've got my cannon pinion remover tool at the ready though, and that makes taking off the cannon pinion a real snap with no bending. So back over on the other side of the watch, let's get started by taking off the balance, which is actually running pretty happily away. For those of you that noticed, the amplitude, and you got to be careful there, I actually dropped the screw down into the balance. Luckily it didn't get into the spring, but that's a good reminder just to be careful with that. As if it gets down into the spring, it can be very difficult to get it out without damaging the spring. But this amplitude on this was about 142 degrees, which is very low. That is not the kind of performance that you want to see. The amplitude was read on the time grapher, and that basically gives you the health of the watch, how much power is delivered from the mainspring all the way through the train of wheels and to that balance is a good summary of what the amplitude is. How much horsepower it has, I guess you could say. And it's running a bit like a dog, this one, so that is going to be something that we're hoping will be addressed by the service we're about to do. Now, there's an automatic winding rotor on this watch. This is an automatic watch, meaning that the movement of your arm and hands as you just do your day-to-day living transfers to that rotor that flops around, and that actually is what winds up the watch, so you don't have to wind it on the side every day. And if you wear an automatic watch, basically if you wear it every day, you never have to wind it. So let's try to take this rotor off. It looks like it's held on by this little clip, and it is. Now underneath, that's going to reveal what maybe if you've watched the channel for a while, you think, oh, well, there's a train of wheels. Maybe one of those is the third wheel, one of them's the fourth wheel, but no. These are actually the wheels for the automatic works. So when that rotor turns, these are the wheels that it turns. They engage with the winding mechanism on the watch, and that's what winds it. So those are not the train of wheels. Those are the automatic wheels. So we'll take those off here. I don't actually know what that little part does just yet, but we'll take it off and clean it anyway. I did figure out what it did later. It just stops the wheels from turning one direction, lets them turn the other, kind of like a click. So now we can take off the train wheel bridge. This is going to be the main bridge of the watch because it also covers the barrel. Oftentimes the movements that we work on here on the channel have two different bridges, a barrel bridge and a train bridge. This one is actually combined into one. I don't know if this is quite what you would call it, but they call a lot of these, they call it a 3/4 plate, ones that cover up the train wheels and the barrel bridge because it covers about 3/4 of the movement. These are typically used in German movements. German watchmaking often will use a 3/4 plate. If you're a fan of A. Lange & Söhne, if you've ever seen them before, they will often use a 3/4 plate as well as many other German brands. Not Swiss, but German. But this one is, I believe, made in, I think it says Germany. I think it might be West Germany. So not surprised to see a 3/4 plate now that I think about it. Okay, the train wheels come out. There's the escape wheel going out last. And since it was all under one bridge, I can even take the barrel out as well at this time. So yeah, animal feed. That's what Master Mix is. Kind of a cool little story with this one. I tried to find out more to see if I could figure out when and how they gave away these watches, but it was actually hard enough just to find information on the company itself, so I wasn't able to dig up anything about how or where this watch could have been used specifically. Now we can take off the little bridge for the pallet fork. And away it comes. And that should let us remove the pallet fork, and out it comes as well. See, there's a little bit of, it's either stuck on my tweezers or there's something stuck in there. It doesn't feel like they got magnetized, and I don't even think they can. These are brass, but maybe just something on the end. And that leaves us this one last bridge for this sort of center wheel. And let's just gently pry that up with a screwdriver. Sometimes they're just loose and you can pick them up with tweezers, but I gave it one shot and decided, we'll just get in there with the screwdriver instead. Okay, there's that, and boom, last wheel is out. Now we can move to the other side because, well, we've got everything out of this side. And now here on the other side, we've got the calendar works, the motion works, and the keyless works. It's always interesting to look at these watches as I turn them over and figure them out because, you know, especially for the channel, I'm usually working on movements that are different each time. I'm not really a specialist in one company of movements or one movement specifically like some people are. You know, you can really get to know a movement and you kind of know the ins and outs, the little tricks about working on it, the tricky parts, the easy parts, that kind of stuff. But I enjoy the challenge of sort of trying to challenge my understanding of how movements work, generally speaking. But I will say that the comfort of working on the same one would be nice. But again, you see so much of the same methods of production here that you can get used to it. Even then, though, I should have just taken the load off of that corrector there. But whatever, nothing flew off, so all's well, as they say. And kind of looking at the keyless works here, it's a little interesting how it's set up. And sometimes I just kind of poke around at it to try to get a feel for how it's done, because as much as there's similarities between watches, there's also differences. And each of these companies decides to do things in their own way. So there's kind of a cover plate here that covers the minute wheel, and then also the intermediate wheel, and it looks like the setting lever spring. So we can work our way down and take these apart. And we're getting pretty close here to having this thing fully disassembled, so that's nice. This part right here is actually what turns the calendar over. It's held in by a couple of screws, and then I can just take it out. You can see there's kind of a bridge with a wheel on it that transfers the turning motion of the minute wheel, maybe the hour wheel. I don't know which one it actually engages with, but one or the other. And then eventually, once every day, that thing turns over the calendar. And as you can see, it's actually held in some tension there with that spring. And maybe it'll be better if I use my little stick just to make sure that this spring doesn't decide to jump off the bench on us here. It's being a little bit stubborn, but there we go. And now you can see the yoke and the setting lever spring here, and then with that, we are just about done with the disassembly. Not too bad. You can see the yoke spring there as well. I'm just going to see if I can take the yoke itself out, though. And yeah, it just comes right out. And this is an interesting part because that's the setting lever. It comes out, and here's the spring for the yoke. And yeah, we've just got this thing just about finished up. I do need to take apart the automatic works here, and you can see there's a spring here that comes out. Not too bad. And then just to get this thing properly clean, I'm going to want to separate this rotor off from this upper bridge for the automatic works. And it's a little finicky to take apart, but as you can see, that little clip kind of holds it in place. And there we go. So now those are apart, and that means that I can continue with the disassembly, as it looks like everything's all set. The last part here is very strange, though. This is the barrel, and it's got the mainspring in it, but the top doesn't come off, and it looks like, based on those kind of punch marks on the top, that it doesn't want to come off at all. So I'm just going to have to do this by hand, just kind of undo it. But look at what I find here. Not only is it quite dirty, but the arbor, which is normally, at least on all the watches I've worked on so far, its own separate part, is actually attached to the lid of the barrel. That is different. There it is. It's just in there. It doesn't come apart. So I don't know. We're going to have to sort that out after this thing's done being cleaned. But for now, here's all the parts all laid out. And we can continue with our restoration here as we work our way forward. Now, I did want to take a little bit of time to show you how the watch cleaning machine that I have works. This is it right here. It's an L&R Mastermatic. And with all the parts in that little cleaning basket, I can start off by lowering this down into the cleaning solution. So that first jar holds the cleaning solution. You turn it on when the red light's on. That means that the heater is starting to go. The heater's not actually for the cleaning solution or the rinses. It's actually the last stage where it's air cleaned. And then basically you just turn it up so that it gets to the point where, and this is what's special about the Mastermatic, is that it has an automatic function where where it actually goes back and forth. It doesn't just spin in one direction, and that aids in cleaning. Then to move on to the next, you don't want to take it with all the solution from the first one in it. You want to spin it like this to kind of get as much of the cleaning solution off of it, because the next two solutions that we're going to put it in are both rinses, meaning that the cleaning itself has been done, but now we're going to use some, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's kind of like ammonia to clean off the rest. So here's the first of the two rinses. And this machine's been very reliable for me. I've had it for about a year now, and it's worked quite well. It's much faster than doing it the way I used to, which was in the ultrasonic cleaner through a 3-step system, but it required some pretty tedious drying of the parts in between and all that. And taking a closer look, you can see some of my kitchen utensils or kitchen appliances, but also that it goes back and forth in the solution to really get it extra clean. And then once again, just to keep any type of contamination between jars to a minimum, I'm just going to give it a quick rinse off here. And that just gets the majority of the fluid back into the jar there, so that, for example, I mean, these are the same solution, the first one, or the second and the third. But I mean, you know, it's getting cleaner as it goes, so you want that last one to be as pure as you can. Each time I do these, by the way, I'm cutting out the time here on the video, but I'm leaving them in there. The manual for this says about 4 minutes, but I usually go longer because I'm not in a hurry. Like, I'm not running so many watches through this thing that I need to do that. I usually leave them in for 10, 12 minutes each, something like that. All right, so now we can do the same thing again, just so that it's not dripping the solution, and just sort of get the majority out of it. And then that lets us put it in the last section here. And the last one is, it actually has an electric heater at the bottom that produces just heat that rises up into this sort of chamber. And then you drop this in, and then you just turn it on a little bit just so it's got some air moving over it. And this does a really good job of drying it. Remember, these are these solutions evaporate anyway, so you don't need much, just 5 minutes in this with a little bit of heat on it, and you'll get a really good result. Now, that basket can be quite hot though when it comes out, so you just got to be a little careful with it when you first touch it. Just make sure it's not burning hot, and then you just unclip it, and the watch is clean. All the parts are done. So now we're gonna set those aside though, and let's address this dial. Dial cleaning is something that I've been pretty reluctant to do, and I remain so. It's delicate work, and you can definitely make the dial worse. But I got this watch on eBay for not a ton of money, and I do want to at least try my hand at doing a little bit of dial restoration, although it's not really a personal goal for me to be able to do like full dial restorations. That's really a whole nother thing. And it's also not something I particularly like. I actually like a little bit of patina. So, but I do want to practice and try. So I'm going to just try it on this one with just water and this little swab thing. And I am just going to see if I can clean this up, because this dial is actually pretty mucky. It has a little bit of corrosion / wear, but it also just very yellowed, and I don't really like it. And as you can see, that part that I cleaned, there is actually some silver underneath it. So yeah, let's do it. Let's just dive in. I mean, this is part of my journey, right? Is to try this out on watches. Look, I wouldn't do this on one of my more expensive watches, but yeah, let's give it a shot. Let's see if we can't clean it up and see what it does. Maybe make it into a way that I can kind of understand how dirt and stuff comes off of dials and that kind of thing. So I'm going to speed it up a little bit because, well, I'm trying to do this as carefully as I can. But as you can see, it's already starting to look quite a bit better with this, just with water and this thing. So that's kind of nice. I mean, it's pretty obvious this tile has never actually been cleaned. But as you can see, it's already shining through quite a bit in silver. And I'm going to use the... oh no. So as you can see, in the drying process, I have, if you look closely at the bottom, I took off some of the ink. It said self-winding there. And that part of the paint came off. So there we go. Right away, you can see that you go just a little bit too far and you can screw it up. Now, there's some good news here. It's not a disaster, right? I didn't take off the main logo or any of the numbers or anything. But yeah, I mean, this is the risk you take when you decide to do this type of work. I'm not going to let it stop me because, again, this watch wasn't super expensive or anything. It doesn't have sentimental value to me particularly, so I'm going to just sort of continue on. But that's a lesson learned. That paint on there is extraordinarily delicate. And realistically, if I knew that it would be that delicate, I may just not work on it at all. Tried to be extra careful around that Master Mix logo as well. A little tiny corner of it came off, but again, I'm going to have to live with that and chalk it up to lessons learned. Okay, well, let's get this mainspring back in the barrel first, and then we'll do the movement reassembly. But I got to say, I'm not exactly sure how to do this, but I kind of have an idea that I can put the mainspring back in the barrel, and then if I can line up where the mainspring sort of curls up in the middle with that arbor, I may be able to just sort of jam the arbor in there, and then I assume the arbor will just hook naturally. So that's my plan. This is a left-hand mainspring, so I'm using my left-handed winder attachment here, which just means that it goes in there the opposite direction than the right-handed one, which are the more standard issue. It's always tricky to get that last little bit in there, but there we go. Now we just need to remove the actual winder part so that we can expose the spring, and then we can use the plunger to put it back in its home. Now, again, this part I think is pretty straightforward. If I can get this thing back in here around this loop, which it looks like it'll just do naturally. There we go. So we've got that part in there, but as you can see, the arbor is actually in the lid, like I mentioned in the other part that I haven't put on yet. So I just need to make sure that I can get it in where that middle loop is, and then I guess it just goes back together. It's a very bizarre design, but compared to what I'm used to, but yeah. I'm just going to kind of squeeze it back together gently here, make sure that it's sealed up on the edges, and assume that the inside is correct. And yeah, it did. It's gone back together. I just have to hope that the hook on that arbor in the middle will actually hook onto the spring, because I'm not really sure how to test it without just putting it in the watch. So done deal. Let's get back to business here and get rolling. So let's get the movement back together. We'll kick things off with the main wheel here in the middle and a little bridge that goes over it. The movement cleaned up nicely. This is a utilitarian movement, nothing fancy, but looks like it went back, it cleaned up quite nicely. Just make sure that these screws are nice and tight. And there's the barrel going back in. Gonna have to just cross our fingers on that. And this little thing just keeps tension on this little, this little guy that slides back and forth. And now we can put the train of wheels in. Here Here's the escape wheel going in. Okay. Delicate work this, of course, because these need to make sure that they're in their lower pivots so that when we put this on, this 3/4 plate, as I mentioned before, that the pivots can line up there and then I can tighten it down. But there's kind of a lot to get lined up between the barrel itself plus the train of wheels. So we'll just kind of get this lined up and loosely into place like this. And then we can start finicking around with the wheels to get them into their pivot holes. And then once everything kind of drops in, which as you can see, it's not here. Oh, and there we go. Once you can spin those freely, then you're good to go. So that was lucky. Actually went down pretty quickly. The 3/4 plate made me think that I might have to wrestle with this for a while, but either I got lucky or there's something with the design of it. But either way, it went right back in. So I'm happy about that. And you can see I'm keeping just some light tension with that stick on the top, and that's to make sure that those pivots stay in their holes, because if they don't, and then you try to screw down that plate, well, you're going to break one of them. I'm using some grease here, as this is for the keyless works, which is probably the most heavy-duty part of the watch as far as friction and metal on metal occurrences. This is HP 1300. This is used for medium weight oil, used as medium weight oil, rather than a grease, which is thicker, which is that right there. Again, on the heavy duty stuff, you'll use the grease, and this is the yoke. It actually has quite a bit of pressure on it, and it moves around every single time you pull the crown out on your watch. So I like to use a little bit of grease there. You want to make sure that the yoke is engaged with the sliding clutch. That is what it acts upon. And this is just that little tension spring that we took out before. And again, I'm just going to be extra careful here and use the stick just to help guide it into place, and also have something above it in case it decided to jump away. It would just jump into the stick. There we go. This is for the calendar works. Again, this is that jumper. The thing that actually pushes the calendar over is that little notch in the middle of that circle for that part that I'm putting in here. When that thing spins all the way around to the other side, it grabs one of the teeth on the calendar ring that we'll put on, the thing that actually has the numbers for the calendar on it, and it just pushes it over to the next day. And then that thing has to go all the way around again before it's going to go back over again. So it's got enough teeth in it, given the thing that it engages with, that it takes 2 full revolutions of the hour hand on the watch, right, going from 12 to 12, and then again to actually kick the date over. And this little bridge that holds it in place, as I mentioned before, also has the intermediate wheel in there. That transfers the energy from the wheel that it's sort of taking the time from over to that jumper. Quick test to make sure that the tension's good and it looks fine. Now I can put the yoke spring in over here. And just make sure that it's seated in place. I'm going to put a little bit of grease in between where the yoke spring and the yoke actually touch, because that yoke spring will actually slide along that a little bit, and that could create some friction. Now, one of the big reasons that we do that is so that there's no little metal shavings. And now I get in here and I'm like, oh, I forgot something. And what I forgot is the setting lever screw. Now, normally I put that in before I put the bridge on the other side in, and now I can't find it. And I can't even remember actually taking it out, because remember, this doesn't have a proper screw. This watch uses that kind of system where you push it down against a spring-loaded thing. And I'm going to look if maybe I missed something, and this is the basket that we cleaned the watch in, to see if maybe a part fell out. And there it is. Do you see it down at the bottom? That's exactly the part that I need. And what I realized is that I never actually took it out of the movement, because it's not actually a screw. It is simply a post that sits in that hole. And when you push down on it, it pushes down on the setting lever spring on the other side to free up the crown and stem. Here's the problem. I need to put it in on the other side, right? Because that's actually the only way that it goes in. And so I'm going to have to flip over the movement here, and I'm going to have to take this stupid thing back apart to get to that. Pretty annoying to have to rewind your work a bit, and I'm going to put a little grease in here too, but this is where this part actually goes. Now, had I taken it out at the time of disassembly, I think my brain would have triggered, oh right, put that thing in, because I do that exact same motion with a setting lever screw. But the fact that I left it in the movement and didn't actually notice that it was a part that was supposed to come out because it's not a screw, that got me. So now, back to business we go again. And this is just part of learning watchmaking. Everybody does it. You just sometimes have to go back in time a little bit. And thankfully, the watchmaking gods were kind to me here. And this plate went back on pretty problem-free again. So, yeah. Nobody ever said that watchmaking won't test your patience, because I can tell you, when you're sitting at the bench and you have to go backwards and do something you've already done, it can be quite frustrating. In fact, we have to put all the stuff back in now that we had already done on this side of the watch. But for your mercy, I will speed it up and show you. I don't want you to miss any of the build, but at the same time, I did want to kind of speed it up a little bit, back to about where we were before. I did put in the setting lever, though, there. That's the one thing that we're a little bit ahead on. This is the setting lever spring going in right now. So back to business. Honestly, taking it back apart and putting it back together is not a huge deal. The bigger deal is that I figured out that I was missing a part and knew to look in the basket. Because that would have been the real pain, is just not even understanding that a part was missing, or, not being able to find it. Once again, I'm going to be using the grease here on the setting lever, because it's very high friction. It just rubs metal to metal to do that. So you really want to make sure that that's properly lubricated. And once again, that's an intermediate wheel there. And then there's this kind of weird little cover thing that came on this particular version of the watch that keeps the wheel in place, and then also goes over the keyless works to protect it. And just a quick test to make sure that it is engaging properly, and yes, all looks well. So now we can flip the watch back over and start working on the automatic works for this, as well as making sure that we get everything lubricated, which I've done. This is that little part that I mentioned before that kind of keeps the automatic works from going one direction. This one's not the most clever design for an automatic winder that I've seen on the watches I've worked on, but it seems pretty robust and like it would do the job. And there we go. Now there is a spring here as well that provides some level of tension. I need to put that back in the upper part. And I'm just going to do that here on the bench before I move over to put that back on the top. Because this is a bridge of sorts, I need to engage the pivots of those 3 wheels that you see and make sure that they're lined up properly before I go screwing this thing down. And now I can go ahead and screw the automatic winding bridge back on. And with that, that means that we can move on to the good stuff here. We can get the pallet fork in. And the little bridge that holds it in place. And just making sure that these teeth are properly engaged with the escape wheel. And that means, well, it's time to put the balance in this thing, and let's see what we've got. The moment of truth is upon us, as it often is when we're doing the watchmaking. Okay, we've got some life here. So that's always a good sign that when it kicks up like that. And it also means that we're likely on a good track with the mainspring, which I was a little bit worried about just because of the whole barrel setup that I've never seen before and made it kind of difficult to check. But as you can see, yeah, this thing's got a little fire in it. It is cruising now. And with that, that means, of course, that we can get into oiling the jewels and replacing or removing, cleaning, and then oiling any other. This one actually has kind of an interesting setup where we oil one of the jewels and then the other one has a cap jewel that's attached to this little cover plate. Now I do have to be careful. If you look closely, you can see the round dot of oil there on the right hand side that's attached that I've placed on the other side of this. And that means that when I place this down, I have to be careful and make sure that that round dot of oil stays in place, which it did here. And we can go around and oil some of the other wheels. This is going to get a little bit of 9010. Same here. And that, of course, means that it's time for us to take off. That's right, everybody's favorite part, the cap jewels on the balance. These are very, very tricky. So this particular type of shock system here doesn't actually anchor itself to the setting. If you look at the Inca block that are common on a lot of the watches I've worked on, they actually have a little hinge that makes sure that that can't go flying away when you take it off. So I'm using a piece of Rodico not only to take out this jewel here for cleaning and lubrication, but also to make sure that the spring doesn't fly away. All right, so now that that's been done, I can replace the jewel setting here and then get this shock setting put back in as well. And as I said, it's a little bit more tricky when it doesn't have that hinge because you can't just simply close it and then lock up the locking part. You also have to place this part first. And this can be very touchy. And there we go. We have the end seated, and now we just need to get the locking parts put in place, and that'll hold the jewel in place. Ooh. You can see it came out of its seating there, so it needs to be put back in. Make sure the jewel's good and flat, and then we can finally, there we go, place the locking part. I'm just going to reposition my tweezers so I can kind of drag the other locking part under. Like that. And there we go. Now that cap jewel is in place. Now the watch is running on the other side here, so we'll go ahead and take this out. You can take this out while it's running. Again, I'm going to use a piece of Rodico just to make sure that the spring doesn't fly away on me. It's easy to forget that these are in fact springs, and that means that they're designed to hold and sort of deflect tension. And if you put a little bit on it, those things go flying, and they are tiny, tiny enough to stick to your clothes, to stick to your skin, and you wouldn't even feel it. That's how small they are and how lightweight they are. Okay, we'll set this down. And now we can take out the jewel setting. And you can see the balance pivot just working away there. And now that I've got the jewel setting all cleaned up and ready to go, whew, one shot, you gotta love that. And then once again, the very tricky business of getting the shock spring back into place safely. There we go. And just need to get this other foot in here, and then we'll have job done. That means we can flip it back over and put on the calendar works. Here's the little jumper. Again, this just provides tension on it so that right when that calendar gets to the edge, it actually just sort of clicks over. And I have to make sure I'm a little careful here because that jumper spring, it can go. That one can go across the room, and it's pretty small. Okay, and then I'm going to just put a tiny bit of HP 1300 here where the jumper spring meets the calendar, just so that as the calendar turns around, it distributes just a little bit of that oil, so it's not just straight up metal on metal. But you don't want to put too much there, I don't think. Now, this particular calendar works is held in place by these two kind of, I don't know what you call these, placeholders. Calling them a bridge is a bit much. But they're the things that hold the calendar in place. So we can just give it a quick test, and it just doesn't feel right. It should click over, and it feels like it's dragging a little bit. And after close inspection, maybe some of you noticed this. I noticed that bottom cover plate, it's not quite right. It's sticking out a little bit too far, and I realized why. I think I just put it on upside down, and it looked close enough. Usually these things will only go on one way or the other. But if I give it a quick flip and then get it screwed back down, now I can see that it's lining up properly with the edge, and instead of dragging, the little wheel just clicks right over. So there we go. Now we can get back to the dial that is restored the right word? Well, we cleaned up. How about that? And get that thing ready to install. That's what they call the dial washer. That just makes sure that that hour wheel stays down. And just make sure that the dial is screwed back into place. And now we can put on the automatic winding rotor. And there's this little clip that screws into place as well to make sure that the rotor stays attached. So we'll get that screwed down. And now let's take a look at the hands. So one thing actually bothered me about these hands, and I know I'm being nitpicky, but hey, I'm nitpicky, right? Trying to do watchmaking stuff. And that's that these hands look like they've had the loom replaced on them, or if they haven't, it could be original, but I doubt it. It's too green for me. I don't actually like the color, and it also just feels kind of worn out. It's also not glowing. So I'm going to relume the hands. That's right. We're going to get right back in there and relume these hands. So first things first is to remove the old loom. And as you can see, I'm doing this just with my tweezers on a little staking block. I'm going to replace this with just white loom. I think that would look nice against the dial as it sits where it's more silvered. I don't think I need to go for some aged loom look here. I think I can just go for white. So I've got my loom kit and we're going to redo these hands. So to do this, I'm going to use the screwdriver here just to take the bulk of the old loom out. And then I'll do that on both hands. And then in between, I'm actually going to put them in my ultrasonic cleaner just to get any little bits that might be left over out of there so that it's a perfectly clean setup so that when we put the new loom in, there's no little bits in there to make it look worse or to keep it from adhering to the hand. So there we go. Still a little bit in there. All right. So I'm going to go throw those in the ultrasonic cleaner. And while those are cleaning, we can start to mix up our loom. And this is made up of two ingredients, basically. There's a binder, which is what this is. It's just a liquid that hardens, right? It as the water evaporates for it, it hardens and becomes something to basically carry the loom in. And the loom is actually just a powder, and you can see it here. This is just a luminous powder. That's what loom stands for. And this is a non-toxic modern powder. Some of the old ones were made using, the older ones were made using radium, which if you've ever read about radium, you'll know how dangerous of a product it is. And yes, a lot of old watches still have it in there. And then the other product that was used after that that's much safer is called tritium, which is also radioactive, but has a half-life of about 12 and a half years. So the watches that they use it on, it's pretty safe these days. Okay, so here's the cleaned hands ready for their new loom. Now, you remember to put these on, you put the loom on the bottom. So this is actually the bottom of the hands that you're looking at right now. And doing this isn't too hard. You use a little oiler, just a metal stick basically. You get a little dab of the loom on there, and then you kind of gently drag it across the gap, and the capillary action actually just pulls it across. And that's it. All you have to do after that is let it dry, and it tends to work out pretty darn well. And again, you should make sure that you're doing this on the bottom because, you are going to go over the edges a little bit, and it would look pretty sloppy if it was on the top. But when you see the finished product, which you will in just a second here, you'll go, oh, right, well, that looks great. It just sort of fills in those gaps and does a really good job. I'm going to use just a dust cover here just to make sure that nothing gets on it. Remember, any dust that hits on there won't work. And while that's drying off, we can do the final time grapher here for our movement. And after a little bit of adjusting, check this out. Ooh, baby. How nice is that? 0 seconds, 0.3 millisecond beat error. Okay. An amplitude just a hair above 300 degrees. A dramatic improvement from where we started from. This thing was 600 seconds off. The amplitude was, I think, in the 140s, and the beat error was, 2 or 3 milliseconds or something. Now we're down to 0.3, which you do actually want to try to get that a little closer, but I'm going to be happy enough with this as it stands. Really great with that. And now that the hands are dry, we can check them out as well. So let's take a quick look. And there you go. That's what it's supposed to look like. That's what you want to see. Nice consistent color across. It's not creeping up into the main part of the hand where it's spilling over and looking sloppy. And there we go. So job done on that. They look much better. I'm much happier with how these came out with just the white loom. Now, normally I replace crystals on the watches, but this crystal is actually in really good shape. And so I'm just going to give it a quick polish. I also wanted to show you how to do this because you can do this while the crystal's still on the watch. You get this product that I'm using here called Polywatch, and it works on all these acrylic crystals. And you just use a simple cloth and you just basically rub on it for 3-4 minutes. And it will take out basically all of the tiny scratches and even some pretty decently sized scratches and really bring your crystal kind of back to life. And I recommend it. The stuff just works really well. and I use it on the crystals that are already in really good shape that I don't feel need to be replaced, like this one. So I'm going to replace the gasket on the back here. I've put it on a silicone grease treatment, and boom, that goes right back on, just to make sure that no water or anything gets in the back. Now I'll take the case, which I also, by the way, put through the ultrasonic cleaner and made sure that it was all cleaned up and ready to go. I'm not doing any type of case restoration work on it. This case was already in good shape. And I'm going to use my crystal press now to put the crystal back into the watch. To take it out, you actually just push on the back with your thumbs. They're friction fit and they usually just come right out. And voila. Yep, good and firm, looking nice. And that crystal, as you can see right there, looks brand new. So I'm happy with that. No need to bother ordering up a new one or anything like that. And now we're in the home stretch. We can case this watch up and see how it looks when it's all cased. First thing we need to do, though, before we put the hands on, you may not think of this right away, but you actually turn the watch hands, even though they're not on there, until the calendar just turns over. Why is that? Well, that would be midnight, right? When does it become the next day? It becomes the next day at 12 midnight of the previous day, or, that's when it turns over. So you want to make sure that when the thing hits 12, right there is when the calendar turns over. And that way it's actually accurate for the person who's going to end up wearing the watch. And now we can put the minutes hand on. Like that. And once again, I just like to make sure that the hands aren't touching up against each other or rubbing on any of the numerals or anything crazy like that. There is one more hand. Now this one we didn't relume because it doesn't have any lume on it. This is the second's hand. And I'm just going to use the little hand press tool here just to make sure that it's in place. Yeah, that looks about right. Nothing's touching. The hands aren't dragging against anything else. Yeah, looks fine. Now we can put the case back on. And not forget the movement ring, of course. That just makes sure that the movement can't slide around. That means that we can put the winding stem back in, and then of course the case back goes on. And I'm going to go ahead and put a new strap on this watch as well, just because I think it'll enhance the appearance somewhat. And there you go, a Master Mix watch. I don't really know what brand you would call it. Again, I believe that this is more of like a corporate type of thing. But cool, it actually came out really good. The dial looks good. It looks even better in real life than it does here. And yeah, there were some lessons learned throughout the course of this watch. But I mean, that's kind of part of the journey, right? You're supposed to learn lessons. That's part of the deal. And yes, don't worry, the loom works. The last time I didn't put a loom shot on my video, I got yelled at. So there you go. You can see that the loom actually does glow in the dark. I did want to say thank you so much for watching the video. If you'd like to support what I'm doing here on the channel, you can check out my Patreon. There's a link in the description. And I want to thank my patrons, Kelsey, Stan, Dustin, Brenton, Adam, Caleb, Russell, James, Samuel, Tony, Max, Mitchell, Adrian, Kyle, Erica, Trevor, Robert, Squirrel, Der Guga, Lewis, Dominic, Brad, Mikey, Zurin, Grant, Patrick, Uri, Alan, Swami, Alex, Michael, Wynn, and Bethany. Thank you so much for your support there. If you want to catch up with me in between videos as well, Instagram's the best place to do that. I'll post some pictures of what I'm working on, and you can ask questions and stuff over there. It's wristwatch_revival. Again, there's a link to that in the description. Once again, I want to thank you for spending the time with me. I really do appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.